Night had fallen. The city was cloaked in darkness, with only the occasional flicker of streetlights piercing through the gloom. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the silent streets. Rain lashed against the windows, each drop a tiny hammer striking the glass. The storm outside was relentless, a symphony of chaos that mirrored the turmoil within Daniel's mind. Inside his dimly lit apartment, Daniel sat staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. The mirror was foggy from the steam of a recent shower, adding a ghostly haze to his reflection. Fatigue etched lines on his face. Or was it something else? His eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed dull and lifeless. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the face staring back at him wasn't entirely his own. He peered closer. His reflection remained unchanged, a hollow mimicry. Yet there was an unsettling depth to those eyes, as if they held secrets he couldn't fathom. He leaned in, searching for any sign of the familiar, but found only an alien presence, staring back. He splashed water on his face, trying to erase the unease creeping into his mind. The cold water provided a momentary shock, a brief respite from the growing dread. But as the droplets dripped from his chin, the feeling of unease returned, stronger than before. A prickling sensation ran down his spine, the feeling of being watched. It was as if invisible eyes were boring into him, scrutinizing his every move. He shivered, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He glanced at the mirror again. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the confined space. Fear gripped him, a cold, unrelenting force that tightened around his chest. His reflection now wore a sinister grin. The smile was twisted, unnatural, a grotesque parody of his own. It was as if the mirror had come alive, mocking him with a malevolent glee. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over a bottle of mouthwash. The bottle hit the floor with a loud crash, the liquid spilling out and spreading across the tiles. He barely noticed, his eyes fixed on the mirror. The crash echoed in the small room. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The sinister grin was gone, replaced by his own weary face. He felt a moment of relief, but it was fleeting. The reflection was gone, replaced once again by his own tired visage. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in with an oppressive weight. He tried to rationalize. Stress, overwork, that's all it was. He had been pushing himself too hard, burning the candle at both ends. It was only natural that his mind would play tricks on him. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been sown. A nagging voice whispered in the back of his mind, questioning his sanity. What if it wasn't just stress? What if there was something more sinister at play? A chilling premonition that something was amiss, something lurking beneath the surface of his reflection, watching, waiting. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone in the room. Rain continued to fall relentlessly as Elena hurried along the street, seeking shelter from the downpour. The sky was a dark, brooding gray, and the sound of thunder rumbled in the distance. She clutched her coat tighter around her, feeling the cold rain seep through the fabric. Her shoes splashed through puddles, sending water up her legs. She needed to find refuge, and fast. Her eyes fell upon a dimly lit shop, its window displaying an eclectic collection of antiques. The sign above the door was old and weathered, the paint peeling away to reveal the wood beneath. The shop seemed out of place, almost as if it had been forgotten by time. Yet it beckoned her with an inexplicable allure. Drawn by an unknown force, she stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing her arrival. The transition from the cold, wet street to the warm, dimly lit interior was jarring. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the gloom. The air hung heavy with the smell of dust and decay. It was as if the shop had not been disturbed for years. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards under her feet. Elena browsed the cluttered shelves, her fingers trailing over tarnished silver and chipped porcelain. Each item seemed to have a story, a history that whispered to her as she touched them. There were old clocks, faded photographs, and strange trinkets that she couldn't quite identify. She felt a strange connection to the objects, as if they were calling out to her. At the back of the shop, something glinted in the dim light. It caught her eye, standing out amidst the shadows. She moved closer. Curiosity piqued. The object seemed to shimmer, almost as if it had a light of its own. It was an antique hand mirror, its silver frame intricately engraved. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with delicate patterns that seemed to dance in the light. The glass was slightly tarnished, but it still reflected her image clearly. She felt an inexplicable urge to pick it up. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the cold metal. The mirror felt heavy in her hands, and she could feel the weight of its history. As she held it, she felt a strange sensation, as if the mirror was alive, pulsating with a hidden energy. The shopkeeper, a stooped old man with eyes like faded embers, watched her silently. His presence was almost ghostly, blending into the shadows. He said nothing, but his gaze was intense, as if he was waiting for something. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. As she gazed into the mirror, a cold dread washed over her. The reflection seemed to waver, and for a moment she thought she saw something move behind her. Her heart began to race, and she felt a growing sense of unease. The mirror seemed to hold secrets dark and unsettling. It wasn't her reflection staring back, but the face of a stranger. The eyes in the mirror were not her own, and the expression was one of pure terror. She dropped the mirror with a gasp, stumbling back. The shopkeeper's eyes never left her, and she knew she had to leave, but something held her in place, a force she couldn't understand. The old art gallery buzzed with anticipation. Tonight was the unveiling of the late artist, Julian Belrose's final masterpiece. His paintings, known for their disturbing imagery and dark symbolism, had always evoked a sense of unease, a glimpse into the abyss of the human psyche. Amongst the art patrons and critics stood Thomas, an art journalist, his gaze drawn to the shrouded canvas. As the velvet cloth fell away, a collective gasp rippled through the room. The painting depicted a solitary figure standing before a mirror. But it was the reflection that chilled Thomas to the bone. The figure in the mirror was not the man in the painting, but a grotesque distortion, its eyes burning with malevolent intent. In that instant, Thomas felt a cold hand grip his heart. Back in his apartment, Daniel couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that had taken root in his mind. He found himself drawn back to the bathroom mirror, as if compelled by an unseen force. The lines on his face seemed more pronounced, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the mirror's surface. A whisper, faint and indistinct, seemed to emanate from the reflection itself. It spoke of shadows and darkness, of a presence lurking just beyond the veil of reality. Panic welled up within him. He slammed his eyes shut, his hands gripping the edge of the sink. When he opened them again, the whispering had stopped. Only the sound of his own ragged breathing filled the silence. Elena couldn't bring herself to discard the antique mirror. It had been a gift from her grandmother, a relic passed down through generations, each owner whispering tales of its mysterious origins. The mirror's ornate frame, with its intricate carvings, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Drawing Elena in despite her growing unease, it called to her its cold, metal whispering promises of forbidden knowledge. She often found herself standing before it, entranced by the faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emanate from its depths. The mirror was more than just an object. It was a portal to another realm, a gateway to secrets best left undiscovered. Each time she gazed into its depths, the stranger's reflection grew stronger, more defined, as if it was slowly coming into focus. The figure was not just a shadow, but a presence, an entity with a will of its own. It seemed to be waiting, watching, biding its time, their malevolent gaze boring into her soul. The eyes in the mirror were not her own. They were darker, filled with a malevolence that sent shivers down her spine. She could feel the weight of their stare, a tangible force that left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. She began to see glimpses of the stranger in other reflective surfaces, in the shop windows as she walked down the street, in the puddles of water that collected after the rain, even in the blank TV screen that flickered in the dark. The stranger was everywhere, a constant, haunting presence that she could not escape. Shop windows, puddles of water, even the blank TV screen. It was as if the entity within the mirror was bleeding into her world, its influence growing stronger with each passing day. The boundaries between her reality and the mirror's world were dissolving, leaving her trapped in a nightmarish limbo. It was as if the entity within the mirror was bleeding into her world, its darkness seeping into her life like a poisonous gas. The air around her seemed to thicken, filled with an oppressive, suffocating presence that made it hard to breathe. She could feel the darkness closing in, wrapping around her like a shroud, its darkness seeping into her life like a poisonous gas. Elena felt a growing sense of dread, a chilling premonition that she was teetering on a precipice, about to be consumed by a darkness she could neither understand nor control. The mirror's influence was spreading, infecting every aspect of her life. Elena felt a growing sense of dread, a chilling premonition that she was teetering on a precipice, about to be consumed by a darkness she could neither understand nor control. She could feel the entity's presence growing stronger, its grip on her tightening with each passing day. A chilling premonition that she was teetering on a precipice, about to be consumed by a darkness she could neither understand nor control. The line between reality and reflection was blurring, and she feared she was losing herself in the process. The mirror was no longer just an object, it was a living, breathing entity that sought to consume her. About to be consumed by a darkness she could neither understand nor control. The line between reality and reflection was blurring, and she feared she was losing herself in the process. The mirror's influence was pervasive, seeping into every corner of her life, leaving her feeling isolated and alone. The line between reality and reflection was blurring, and she feared she was losing herself in the process. She could no longer tell where she ended and the entity began. The mirror's power was overwhelming, a force that threatened to consume her entirely, and she feared she was losing herself in the process. The mirror's influence was growing stronger, its darkness seeping into her very soul. She was no longer just Elena. She was becoming something else, something darker, something that belonged to the mirror.